So Jesus finishes praying, and he goes to this garden with his disciples, and he's hanging out there. And Judas, who betrayed him, he knew where that place was because Jesus would often go there with his disciples. And Judas comes to the garden guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they're carrying torches, lanterns, weapons. And Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, he goes out and he says, "Who is it that you want?" They say, "Jesus of Nazareth." He says, "I am." And when he said, "I am," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asks them, "Who is it you want?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he said, "I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go." And this happened to fulfill the words that he had spoken, that I've not lost one of those that you've given me. Then Peter, being Peter, draws a sword, strikes the high priest's servant, cuts off his right ear. By the way, the servant's name is Malchus. And Jesus commands Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrest Jesus. They bind him. They bring him to Annas, who is the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who's the high priest that year. And Caiaphas was the guy that said that it'd be better for one person to die than for the whole people, And then Peter and another disciple that are following Jesus to Annas's place. And because this one disciple knows the high priest, he's able to get in. He gets the servant girl to let Peter in. The servant girl asks Peter, "You aren't one of his disciples, are you?" And Peter, to a servant girl, says, "I am not." And it was cold that night, and the servants and the officials stood around a fire that they had made to keep warm, and Peter stood there with them. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus tells the high priest, "I've spoken openly to the whole world. I've taught in the temples and everywhere that our people gather. Why are you asking me? Ask the people that heard me." And then when Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face and said, "Is this the way that you talk to the high priest?" Jesus looks at him and says, "If I said something wrong, testify as to what's wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there by the fire, warming himself, and a couple guys there asked him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" And he denied it, saying, "I'm not." One of the high priest's servants, though, a relative of the same guy that Peter, cut the guy's ear off, a relative of that guy, challenges him and says, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" And again, Peter denied it. And at that very moment, a rooster began to crow. And the Jewish leaders take Jesus from Caiaphas to the place of the Roman governor Pilate. And by now it's early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, because the Jews wouldn't associate themselves with the Gentiles, if they wanted to be able to, celebrate their Passover feast, they don't go inside the palace. So they ask Pilate to come out. He comes out. He says, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Their response, "Well, if he weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." And Pilate says, "Well, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." Well, we have no authority, no jurisdiction to execute anyone. And this took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus asks him, "Well, are you asking me that question, or are other people putting these ideas in your head?" Pilate says, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. Tell me what you did." Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place." Pilate is like, "Oh, so you are a king then?" And Jesus says, "You say that I'm a king. Those are your words. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And Pilate hears that and says, "What is truth?" And with this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, I haven't found any basis for a charge against this man. And it's your custom for me around this time of year to release to you a prisoner of mine. So do you want me to release the king of the Jews? And they shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising against Rome.